It's great to see everyone. We are studying Parashat Bo this week, and it's a great honor to learn with everybody. This week we're going to be reading the last 3 of the 10 plagues: locust, darkness, and the slaying of the firstborn. Before we start, I want to thank tonight's sponsors. First is my parents, Mr. and Mrs. Max and Siggy Laredo, for the complete refuah shlema of my mother's father, our grandfather, Gabriel ben Mesoda, which they would like to thank on behalf of the whole family. Thank you to everyone for praying for my grandfather. Miraculous recovery. Still not completely over, but Baruch Hashem, he's home. And my parents would like to sponsor tonight's class as a shi'ur hoda'ah. Normally we do a seudat hoda'ah, which is a meal of thanks, but this is a class of thanks for him overcoming possibly the greatest challenge of his life. My grandfather, I don't know if he's listening in now, I know he's very tired, but my mother went to their house. But my grandfather was a soldier in I don't remember all the wars. We'll here, wait, how could you unmute it, Mom?
There we go. Yes. And
Saba was a soldier in which war?
Well, before the 6-Day War, because he left already the country before that, but he served his country, and he was really saved from death. My mother says 3 times now. So he has a big hodah l'Akadosh Baruch Hu, and very proud of his grandson, Rabbi Yaakov Laredo. Very, very, very proud, and all of his children and all of his grandchildren and his great-grandchildren. And Torah is very important to him, and he wants us to continue studying. That's all we have. That's all we can cling to. And thank everybody for all the wonderful prayers. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. So Baruch Hashem, that was for Gabriel ben Mesoda. Keep him in your prayers, keep him in your Tehillim. People are calling me and telling me, how's he doing, Baruch Hashem? So he's doing good, but keep him in mind still. So thank you. Next is Yasmin Friedman. Thank you very much for your sponsorship for the Refuah Shlema of Yaakov Yosef ben Bela, who unfortunately was just incubated with COVID-19. Very complicated situation. So please have in your prayers, in your Tehillim, Yaakov Yosef ben Bela. And last but not least, thank you to David and Ingrid Edery. Unfortunately, on a very unfortunate event of the passing of David's cousin's husband, Saadia Chaim Ben David, who unfortunately passed away this past Shabbat in Spain from COVID-19. He was only 53 years old, very, very sad. And also, unfortunately, the same week, very soon before, his parents, this is Saadia Chaim's parents, David and Reina Benaim from Melilla, Spain. May the family be consoled, and as you said, David, may they have a refuah shlema. The rest of the family have a refuah shlema. No more casualties, b'ezrat Hashem. Only good things in merit of the Zera Shimshon that we're studying tonight, as well as Rabbi Ari Leib Heyman. May they serve as a tremendous protection for those families and for all of Am Yisrael. Amen v'amen. So thank you, everyone, and b'ezrat Hashem, only b'sorot tovot, only good news. Okay, we're ready to start. We're going to start with the Zera Shimshon, and we're going to jump right into which, as many of the Mefarshim, many of the commentaries explain, was the main Makkah, the main plague, and that was the plague of the slaying of the firstborn. In essence, God could have very well had Moses warn Paro once, and at that time when Paro declines, this plague, the plague of the slaying of the firstborn, should have been the one and only, as we say, one and done plague that was delivered to the Egyptian civilization, with its head being Paro. Now, the reason why God did not do that is because God wanted to, on one hand, give a chance to Paro, maybe with a little bit of blood or a couple frogs and some lice and yada 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 yada. He may wake up from his craze, but as is evident from the Torah, Hashem even strengthened Paro's heart, and that is because God wanted to display His might, His greatness to the entire world, not only to Paro, but also for the Jews and also for everyone to know, as the saying goes, who not to mess with. And obviously, chas v'shalom, not to mess with God. So having said that, the main plague, the plague of Target, as we would like to call it, is the plague of the slaying of the firstborn, which we're going to see a beautiful intricacy, very, very fine detail in it in the eyes of the Zera Shimshon. I want to share with you the verse that tells us at the moment of the slaying what's going on. Let me share it with you. Okay. We are in Exodus chapter 12, verse 12. 12:12. By the way, interesting note, something I thought of myself. Maybe you might have thought of it also. But when was the slaying of the firstborn? It was on midnight, right? So very ironic that the chapter and the verse is 12, like 12:12, midnight exactly, by the way. Okay, having said that, Va'avarti be'eretz Mitzrayim, God says that he will pass in the land of Egypt. Balayla hazeh, on this night, v'hiketi kol bechor be'eretz Mitzrayim, and he is going to strike down all of the firstborn of the land of Egypt, me'adam vad behema, not only the human beings but the animals as well. Uvchol Elohei Mitzrayim e'eseh shefatim ani Hashem, and upon all the gods of Egypt will I wreak judgment, I, the Lord. So this verse has a lot of very, very subtle nuances, but that which we're going to speak about tonight is, what the Zera Shimshon pays attention to, is the idea of Kol Bechor Me'eretz Mitzrayim. Every single one of the firstborns was striked down. He quotes Rashi, famous Rashi. Rashi says, Kol, all, literally includes all the firstborns passed away, even from a different nationality. That means if for whatever case, or I don't know if they had, France was populated back then, but whether it's France or Spain or anywhere else in the Middle East or Asia, if any one of those people came and they moved into Egypt, they immigrated, it doesn't matter. They had a different nationality, their firstborns passed away. Even, now Rashi goes and he takes a step further, and this is where the Zera Shimshon is going to blow his top off with it. He says, Rashi continues to say that even Egyptian firstborns who were at this moment outside of the land of Egypt also passed away. So it's very hard because the verse says, Kol Bechor Be'eretz Mitzrayim, any firstborn in the land of Egypt. So that would mean, okay, I understand Rashi's first point, says Zera Shimshon, of any foreign national that happens to be in Egypt at that time. Okay, so they're going to pass away. Their firstborns are going to pass away too. But the fact that Rashi goes out of his way to say an Egyptian that is not in the land of Egypt, their firstborn is going to pass away also, is a little far flung, especially since Rashi all the time makes sure to give a simple, pure, and quite straightforward explanation on our Torah. He's not known to give us, try to manipulate, so to say, the verse. Normally, Rashi's interpretation is very, very direct on the verse. Not to say that others over-manipulate or over-read into the verses, but Rashi is known to not do that at all. So the Zera Shimshon's wondering, why does Rashi have to go into that second part? I understand that all of the Egyptians and even the non-Egyptians that are in the land of Egypt, they passed away, the firstborns. But why does Rashi have to go out of his way? And he brings a verse. Take a look at this verse. This verse is in Tehillim, Psalms. King David writes in chapter 136, verse 10, Lemake Mitzrayim bivchorehem, ki le'olam chasto. To him who smote the Egyptians with their firstborns, for his kindness is eternal. Rashi says on the Torah that based on King David writing this, we see that Egyptian firstborns, even outside the land of Egypt, passed away as well. And this is what the Zera Shimshon's bothered with. The Zera Shimshon wants to know, why is Rashi telling us this? Just interpret, very simple, only the firstborns, even foreign nationals, are the ones that died. Why is it that the ones outside of Egypt had to die also? I mean, where's Rashi really getting this interpretation from? So, very interesting insight. Our verse says the Zera Shimshon seems to say that all the firstborns did pass away in the land of Egypt, regardless of their nationality. It said, Kol Bechor Be'eretz Mitzrayim. So that's clear. So now the Zera Shimshon says, as many of us know, the skeptics would have said, this plague was not God aiming it at Egypt. This plague was aimed to some random reason of all firstborns in the land of Egypt. You see, as we said, the reason why God was delivering the plagues was not only to save the Jewish people or to show the Jewish people the might of God, but it was also to punish the Egyptians. The Egyptians were no righteous people. Yes, they were supposed to host the Jewish people during their exile. Even they could have made them work for their land, their food, their room and board, yada, yada. But not to the extent of suffering and spilling blood and slaying them and torturing them and beating them to a pulp. Absolutely not. So they were being punished for this. A skeptic, says the Zera Shimshon, could have very easily said, these plagues, and this one specifically, was not aimed to punish or to teach the Egyptian people a lesson. No. Rather, other reasons, not specifically aimed at Egypt. Aha. So that is why, explains the Zera Shimshon, God had to show that this attack was an attack on Egypt. It was an attack on the complete society, the mentality, the philosophy, the oppression that the Egyptians inflicted upon the Jewish people. Now, Rashi brings this verse in Tehillim, Lemakeh Mitzrayim bivchorehem, in order to prove to us that every Egyptian firstborn, no matter where they were in the world, perished. Because this was not an attack on just those who lived in Egypt. It was an attack on every single Egyptian. If you were from Egypt, even if you moved out and you immigrated into another country, the fact that you were a bystander, or you may still be a bystander to genocide, a bystander to a tremendous amount of pain, suffering, and affliction that was being imposed upon the Jewish people, makes you guilty as well. And for that reason, the Zera Shimshon says, Rashi goes on to interpret out of his way. Rashi didn't have to do this, but he went out of his way to explain, which is very miraculous. You know, there's all different types of reasons. Oh, you know why the firstborns passed away in Egypt? Because the firstborns used to sleep under the beds or on the bottom of the beds, and there was some type of natural gas that was emitted from the ground during this eve, and that's why the firstborns passed away, which is absolute narishkeit, as we say in Arabic, because there's no way that, as the Mefarshim explain, every single firstborn, no matter if you were a firstborn from one parent or not, you know, let's say even if both parents were married, other marriages, and they came together, this is the first child in this bond or this marriage, problem. Anytime an Egyptian cheated on their spouse, that child is a brand new child from a new relationship. Even though it's a prohibited one, that child passed away. Egyptians were dropping like flies. An Egyptian would come home and expect one, maybe two kids to pass. Half their kids are gone. They realized that him and her, they're both sleeping around and having inappropriate relationships. It was a horrible, horrible scene for Egypt. Now, there's no way that we can ever say that, oh, it was this natural gas in the position where the children used to sleep. That makes no sense. And to even prove that further and to teach the Egyptian people a real lesson, all over the globe, any Egyptian firstborn perished. There was one exception, besides for the Jewish people, and that was Paro himself. God spared Paro's life, even though he was a firstborn, in order that he will see this story unravel, not only from the beginning, but all the way to the end, to prove to him that he was wrong, to prove to him that he was stubborn at first, before God even hardened his heart. He was stubborn with no right. And this is why Rashi goes out of his way to explain that God was targeting and aimed the Egyptian people for their cruelty, for their genocide, for their oppression on the Jewish people. So now, the Zera Shimshon asks another question. He says, so why didn't God just kill only Egyptian firstborns, no matter where they are in the world? Why is it that the foreign nationals also had to be, their firstborns also had to perish? So, the reason is, Rashi tells us, that any one of them could have been skeptical to say, oh, you see, it wasn't the God of the Hebrews who brought these plagues or this plague along. It was ours. No. Hashem was being very clear. You guys are getting whacked also because it's not coming from you. It's coming from the God of the Hebrews, obviously, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Rashi goes on to say that the foreign nationals which were in Egypt, their firstborns passed away because, number one, they had a sense of pleasure when they saw the Jewish people being suffered. It's a sick feeling that a person has or can develop, and that is when someone else is suffering, they feel very good and comfortable about the situation they're in. They're feeling, wow, phew, it's happening to them and not to me. This is a sick mentality. It is, again, a bystander mentality. So these are the two reasons Rashi says that God made sure to not only take the firstborn Egyptians worldwide, but also the foreign nationals. Number one, so that they will not attribute any of this success or of the plague to their own god or deity. Absolutely not. Number two, they themselves were somewhat happy with the Jewish people suffering. Proof is, if they wouldn't have been, they would have gotten up and done something about it. Again, the very, very harsh crime of being a bystander. Comes the Zera Shimshon and says, 1 second over here. This answer of why God also made all the foreign nationals, firstborns, pass away makes sense for captives, refugees, immigrants, slaves. But what about random travelers? Rashi explains that besides for the captives, refugees, slaves, foreign nationals, immigrants, random travelers were also punished, that if they were in Egypt on that bad luck night, if they were a firstborn, they went also. What's the reason for this? Asks the Zera Shimshon. So Zera Shimshon proves the same point home again. Listen to this. God wanted to make it clear that only the Jewish people, only Bnei Israel is referred to as his firstborn. You understand? When God passed over, that's why it's called Passover, right? Pesach. When God passed over the Jewish homes and took none of the Jewish firstborn's life that night, what God was doing is he was sanctifying the Jewish people as a nation, as a whole, sanctifying the Jewish firstborns, as we'll speak about in the next segment of this class, Reb Leib's class. What God did was he was saying to the Jewish people and to the world, make no mistake, it's the Jewish people and the Jewish people only who are referred to as my firstborn, God says. They are Beni Bechori Israel, my firstborn Israel, the Jewish people. So all the firstborns had to die. Anyone in Egypt, any Egyptian outside of Egypt as well. As a result, the travelers had to also go and pass away. So just a quick lesson on those travelers, and I had something else to say, is that how can somebody go and vacation in a country which is committing genocide actively? It's like saying back in the 1940s or even the late 1930s, but specifically in the 1940s, you would take a trip, a touring trip of Germany, Austria, any of these places. Chas v'shalom. What does that mean? Even if you're not a Jew, forget. Even if you're not a Jew, you're going and you're getting a tour. You're getting a tour of the crematorium, and you're getting a tour of the death camps and the railroads. Chas v'shalom. How could you even imagine that? How can a foreign national coming from Asia 3,300 years ago come to Egypt and sightsee? Look at the beautiful pyramids, and look at the palace, and look what they've built and created, and look at all these slaves. Look at these millions and millions of slaves that we have working for us. Absolutely not. So it's very important to know that the bystander effect is something which plays very, very strong in a very small setting, as super, super, super micro, as well as macro. From being at home or at work to within your neighborhood, your community, your country, and the world at large. And yes, I mean, we're definitely not going to get political, although today could be a very political class, but we're not going to stoop down. We're not going to get low. But the world that we have today, that we live in today, is a world where we still have free speech. We are allowed to speak our minds. We should definitely think before we speak our minds. We should obviously learn what the Torah has to say on many and every topic in order that we can properly understand, discern, and choose for ourselves the path that we want to live, the path that we believe in, the path that we want to help others and inspire and enlighten others with. But we do not ever condone or give into anything that has to do with the bystander effect. We are not allowed to sit on side. We're not allowed to be silent. Of course, there are certain times we have to be silent so you don't get killed. But in general, we do not believe in being silenced. That's not a Jewish concept. We see it very clearly in this episode of the slaying of the firstborns by foreign nationals and even travelers. Having said that, we see that from the Zera Shimshon that God himself staged Makat Bechorot, the slaying of the firstborn, this plague, in a way that would be a clear title. It would set a clear title as the firstborn for the Jewish people. The Jewish people benefiting from this title of being called Beni Bechori Israel, the Jewish people being the firstborn. And having that concept and understanding in our minds, we need to realize the responsibility and opportunity that we have as the firstborns of God, as the Jewish people. We have the opportunity and the responsibility to be a light upon the nations, upon the entire world. We set the example. I know it may not be easy at all times, but we set the example, as my favorite line from Spider-Man, back in the day, with great power comes great responsibility. And that is very, very true. Being that we have the great power and connection to connect to our Creator in a greater manner and format than any other nation on this planet. Obviously, only when we apply ourselves. But with that great power comes a tremendous amount of responsibility. Let's not waste that opportunity. Let's not waste that responsibility.